Oh, I'm sorry for the delay, everybody. Welcome, good evening. We are going to continue, like talking about CSS today. So, yeah, CSS Fundamentals, part two. Yesterday's class we introduced CSS and we like spoke about one or two things about CSS. Let me see. So last class we spoke about we introduced CSS. We talked about creating a new CSS file, linking it, how to actually style our pages, different types of styling. We also talked about selectors, talked about pseudo selectors, attributes. So basically images, colors, backgrounds. So we're now going to go into the second part of CSS today. So you might be asking if 2 days is enough to learn CSS. So like, are there not so much more get to learn and know? But the point is, in when you are learning programming, me personally, I always advise that you learn the basics and start up something. You don't waste so much time in learning basic. The best way to learn is by actually practicing on the go. So because this is how I learned actually, and I feel is the most efficient way, because I've also asked many other people. Practicing is the best way to learn instead of continuous reading and reading. So we are going to go through all of the basics today. We'll go into the second part of CSS. Today we'll be talking about we'll just briefly talk about units, text manipulation. We'll talk about fonts, CSS box model, then display, flexbox and grid. They are two very important concepts in CSS. Once you know how to make use of flexbox and grid, then I would say 60% or 65% is CSS developer. Like, you can actually develop a full-fledged website if you're able to understand CSS flexbox and CSS grid. So without much talk, we are going to proceed with our class. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we can move ahead. Okay, so someone should please confirm that they can see my screen. Just need the confirmation that my screen is visible. Can we all see my screen, please?
Yes, sir, we can see your screen.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. So I can go on. So I'm going to open up our project file of yesterday with our HTML files and our CSS files. So this is the project file that we'll be working on from now henceforth. So let me also open up our page in the browser. Okay, so yeah, moving on. The first concept I'm going to be talking about today is units in CSS. So as we all know, okay, let me not assume all of us know, but units are like ways of measurement, like how we measure things. If we did physics in secondary school, we know that units is always what we use to measure things, like in centimeters, meters. All those things are units. So when we come to CSS also makes use of its own units. CSS uses these units to like size items in our CSS, in our web page. So I'm going to be talking about four main units in CSS, and those are those are one, we have the pixels. So if you've ever looked at a CSS page or a web page before, you would have mostly seen px, like 10px, 20px. So this px stands for pixels. The second one I'm going to be talking about is percent, and the third is rem, and the fourth is em. So all of these, or these four units of measurements in CSS, is what we use to measure or size our components. So there is no specific rule on how to use these things. It's just for you to understand what they are, how they work, then you personally will decide how to use them. I myself, in all my time and use of development, I mostly make use of the percentage and the pixels. I hardly even make use of the rem and the em, but it's also based on the kind of projects we are working on. So px stands for pixels. If we understand how it is in the digital world, pixels is actually how our computer screen is measured. So images are displayed on our screen in pixels. So yeah, that is it. So if something is measured as, let's say, 10 pixels, is the amount of space on your screen that is assigned to that particular component or something. So the measurement in pixel is the same across every system. So 1 pixel is the same thing on your phone, on your laptop, on your iPad. No matter the screen size, 1 pixel remains 1 pixel. So I'm just going to demonstrate this by using CSS to select this our paragraph here and give it a font size using pixels, just for us to understand how pixels work. So I'm going to come over to our style.css, and as we learned in the last class about selectors, how we can use classes or IDs to select components on our CSS file. So I want to select this paragraph. I want to select this paragraph here using its class attributes. So I'm going to come over here. Since we already have this class attributes here, I just want to add font size. I know I've not talked about font size before, but as the name implies, font size is the size of the font or the size of the text. So I'm going to say 20 pixels. So if I come over to the browser and refresh, if you notice, it has increased the size of the text. So this text now is 20, this whole text now is 20 pixels. So aside fonts, there are other ways you can use pixels. You can use it in measuring height, size, width, and all of those things. So let me come and add a class here so that we can size our whole container here. So I'm going to give this a class of container, then come over to our CSS file to style it. So I will select container class here. So I'm going to start with giving it a background color so that we can see as things are working. So I'm going to give this background color of blue. So let me come over, refresh. I will see that particular div, the div that houses this paragraph, is what I gave the styling of background blue. If I'm too fast, please, you can call my attention so that I explain again any part you don't understand. Okay, so as I was saying, as you can see here now, we've given this a color. So I gave this a color so that we can visually understand how this sizing work. So the next thing I want to do now is give this thing a width of, let me say, 100, a width of 100 pixels. So when I refresh the page, you will see what has happened. So this width, or the width that's giving this container now from here to here, this is 100 pixels. So no matter the screen size, this thing will always be this width, this 100 pixels. So you can still increase it to 200 pixels, can increase it to, let me say, 1000 pixels, the width to 1000 pixels. Yeah, that's 1000. So apparently 1000 pixels is the size of my own width, the screen of my laptop. Your own laptop might have a wider screen, and if you put 1000 pixels, you might still have space after it. So I want to demonstrate one other thing to us. So let me reduce this to 500 pixels. Reduce this to 500 pixels, and we'll see how small it has become. So if I change the dimension of this page, we'll notice that even in a smaller screen resolution, it still takes that 500 pixel size. It still takes the 500 pixel size. So what I'm trying to demonstrate to us now is when we now go into percentage. So the next now is percentage. The meaning of percentage is it takes the percentage of the parent element. So for instance, if I give this container now 100%, it just spans through the whole page, no matter the width. So if your system is as long as a plasma TV, once you put 100%, it's going to span 100% of that page. So it's recommended that we use percentage when we are working with when we are creating website that should work on multiple devices, on multiple screens. So if it's on a small screen, 100% takes 100% of that small screen. If it's on a big screen, 100% takes 100% of that big screen. So the same, we make it, if I make this 50%, it's going to take half of the screen, which is 50% of the whole screen. So this is how percentages work. The next unit now I'm going to talk about is next unit I want to talk about is the REM unit, which means root element. So you can measure with respect to the size of the root element, which means when we are talking about root elements now, we mean your computer screen itself, because in web development things are sectioned. Like when, for instance, when we come here, this what will we call it, this P is inside this div, and we can still have this whole div inside another div. You get? So the parent of this P is this div, and the parent of this div is this div. So when we talk about parent, we are talking about the direct container above or outer or outside the particular element. When we are talking about root, we are talking about the whole root file, that is your whole browser as a whole. So rem and em are almost the same thing, just that rem sizes a component with respect to the root file, which is the respect to your browser, while em sizes your component with respect to the parent file. For instance, I'm going to give this one a class of outer container. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make the outer container 50%, then size this inner container using rem and em, so that we'll see the difference. So I'm going to say outer container, then I'll say width. Let me give it a width of 50%, and background color, so that we can see the difference. Background color of green. So yeah, this blue background is inside our green, so don't think they are this one is left and this one is right. It's because of this one is blue, that's why it's covering this part. So our whole outer container is green, and we have our inner container as blue. So what I'm going to do now is let us see how this thing will work. Now let's give this one a width of 20 em, a width of 20 em. So 20 em now is like I think we have this 20 em now is sizing it with respect to its parent element. So now let me change this to 20 rem. Okay, I guess I have an issue here. I'm supposed to give our HTML file width of 100%. Let's see if that is the issue. Body, sorry, 100%. So it seems what is changing is different here. Give me 1 minute, please. Let's see if I'm touching the main ish. So let me give this 5 em first. I see the difference. So this is how what 5 em looks like. 5 rem is not supposed to show the same thing. So I'm going to actually need to debug this later and understand why it's showing like this. Maybe I'm not doing something right, but basically the difference between rem and em is rem takes the size with respect to the root file, while em takes the size with respect to its parent element. So maybe we ourselves can also maybe try and understand more on the difference, or on the difference. Sorry, probably it's possible that I'm not getting it right, or I'm getting something wrong here. I don't use it a lot. So yeah, that is it about units in CSS. The next thing I'm going to be talking about is text manipulation. Sorry, please, before I go on, we should help me out here. We should see if we can on our own go and learn more on the difference between rem and em. So next I'm going to be talking about text manipulation. Text manipulation is basically just how you can manipulate your text. So I'm going to be talking about the very most basic tags in text manipulation. I'm going to be talking about very basic tags in text manipulation, which are: one, I'm going to be talking about font size. I've already used font size, so I don't need to talk about this much again. It's just how you can change, it's just changing the size of your text. Next, we have line height. Next, we have I'm also going to be talking about text decoration. Also be talking about text align, and what else? Text transform, font weight, color. I've also made use of color, so I'm not going to talk about that so much again. Then we have font style. So basically most of these terms are self-explanatory when and if we look at it. So font size is basically sizing our text. We can increase the size of, so let me use this P as I demonstrated before. P, this text. So I made the font size 20, which made it, sorry, let me remove this. I made this font size 20, which made it this big. If I reduce it to 10, we can see that it has become very small. So that is what font size does. Then when we talk about line height basically means the space above and below a particular text. So if I actually, let me increase this back to 20. So if I actually increase the line height of this text, you might not see so much difference. Okay, you would see a difference because of this space here. So let me increase the line height here, or let me add the line height here and make this 10 pixels. We would see that the space above and between has reduced. We will only notice it coming together because it's only the below one we will notice. There is nothing above to help us notice. But if I increase this text, it will help us notice, make it more than one line. I will notice that, see, it reduces the line height. So if we increase the line height here and make it 20, the spacing between the lines are also going to increase. So aside text font size, line height, I also made mention of what other things did I mention here? Text decoration. So what text decoration does basically is, we have attributes of underline, so can just decorate our text by something like this. So aside underline, I think we have one other one. I think there should be overline. Yeah, overline basically just puts a line above it, and I'm pretty sure there are many other values for text decoration, so we can also go through them by ourselves. Aside text decoration, another thing we have is, hello, okay, aside text decoration, another thing we have is text transform.
Sure. No.
While I do, who they play PS for you now? Okay, so David, person just log in, they play game. Okay, sorry for the distraction, everybody. So the next property I'm going to talk about is the text align. Text align is just to align our text on a particular container. So aligning, we have center, we have left, and we have right. So let me just use center to demonstrate how text align works. And as you can see, it has made all of our text come to the middle. So aside center, we also have left, makes everything come to the left. We also have right, makes everything go to the right. Then we now also have justify. So if we use MS Word, well, we'll know this alignment. Justify just makes it in a box like, stretches it in a box like manner. So one other thing, what else did I mention here? Text transform, font weight. Text transform is just like to make it capitalized, uppercase, or lowercase. So let's make use of lowercase here. It's going to make all of our text to be capital letter. If you say lowercase, it's going to make all of our text small letter. So again, please, this is a very important point to note. You don't have to cram all of these things. Please don't make that mistake. Don't go and start feeling there are just so many terms to learn. So you don't have to cram all of these things. Me myself, I've developed countless websites, but sometimes I still have to browse. I still search on Google how text align works. So the point is understand the concept of how these things work and how you can use them. You don't have to cram all of these concepts. It is not math that you have to learn formula. so you always have Google as reference anytime. So talking about this now, I'm going to mention my number one reference for anytime I have issues on web development. It's W3 Schools, and secondly Stack Overflow. So basically you don't need to go on Stack Overflow to search for your issues. Just search on Google, and Stack Overflow is the first thing that comes up. And aside Stack Overflow, we have W3 Schools, so you can just check them out by yourself. W3 Schools is w3schools.com. This should always be your go-to reference. It is mine, but you don't necessarily have to make it yours, but I'm just recommending it. So we have W3 Schools, and we have Stack Overflow. So these two places are always where I go to anytime I have issues or I forget some things. So moving on, I've talked about text transform. The next thing I'm going to talk about is color. I've made use of color before. I used color here, so just write color and the value, and it's going to change the color of your text. Next we have font weight. As the way font size is, just increases the size. Font weight just makes it bolder or less bolder. So in font weight we can make it bold, which makes our text bold, or we can make it normal, which makes our text normal. So lastly, the last thing I mentioned was font style. So in font style we have italics, for instance, which can make our text bend and all, or we can still make it normal to stay. So as I mentioned before, when we were talking about basic HTML tags, some HTML tags already does some of these things, like font weight. If you want to make a text bold in HTML, you can just use the B tag. If you want to make it italics in HTML, you can just use the I tag. So HTML, so depending on how you want to use or which one you prefer or the nature of your project, then you can use any of these things. So next I'm going to talk about fonts, using fonts. So different sites actually make use of different fonts. So some sites make use of cursive fonts, special, some fancy fonts and all of those things. So, and our system only comes with a specific amount of fonts. So if you want to add fonts to this text, or you want to change the text of this font, let's say you want to use Arial or Times New Roman, let's say we'll make use of font family. But let's see if Times New Roman will work. So as you can see, it did not change because my laptop does not have Times New Roman. So what you have to do to make use of some fonts in your web page is to import them, and Google Fonts has made this thing very easy for us to use, and also gives us a guide, step-by-step guide. You just have to copy one code, import code, and you can make use of the font. So I'm going to show us now how to make use of Google Fonts. So we're just going to come here and search let me see, font Google. Okay, so I'm just going to select anyone here just for the sake of this tutorial. So let me make use of this Roboto font. So as you can see, this is how Roboto font looks like. So all you have to do is select all the different formatting of this font you want to make use of, light, thin, italics, and also you can just click select, just select all the variations of this particular font. Then if you come over to the right side here, you'll see either link, which is connected using link tag in our HTML file, or we make use of the imports, which makes the code lesser. So I personally like making use of the import itself, so I can just put it in my HTML file. So I can just copy all of this, come to my HTML file and paste it at the top. So since I'm in a CSS file, sorry, I don't need this CSS tag. So now this line of code here has basically just imported the font family Roboto. So if we come back to this page, it also shows us how to make use of this font. So if you scroll down, we'll see how to call this font. So I'm just going to copy this also, come here and paste it. So font family Roboto or sans serif. So if we notice, we have two font types here, and what this means is if the first font cannot load up, you should load it up using this second font. So that's just what it means anytime you see multiple fonts in a font family. So I'm just going to refresh, and as you can see, the font style has changed. So let me just remove this so we can see the difference. See how it is now. If I uncomment this, the font size and the font family has changed. So yeah, that is it for Google Fonts. And now, before I continue, as I normally do, I want to take a pause and allow us to ask any questions if we have any. Please, this is our time to ask before I go on. Does anybody have any question? Any questions? So can I go on? Okay, I guess I'm going to go on then. So okay, so moving on, the next thing I'm going to talk about is CSS box model. Yeah, CSS box model. So CSS box model is actually a concept that we can use to understand how elements work in CSS. So before I go into coding, I want to introduce us to something called developer tools in our web browser. So if I'm making use of Chrome, all you have to do is right click on our page and click inspect element. So I'm going to use this inspect element to first of all explain what CSS box model is. So follow my mouse. If we come down here to this part of the code, this is what we call box, or this is a box model for CSS. So every single element in your HTML page makes use of this concept, both your text, your divs, like anything at all on your HTML page makes use of this concept. So what it means is everything has a padding. They come in layers: margin, border, padding, and inner content. So this is, you have your actual content. What comes directly after it is your padding. Then you have your border. Then outside your border you have your margin. So as this does not confuse you, I'm also going to demonstrate this so that we'll understand how these things work better. So first of all, we should understand what border is. Border is just like, something that encloses an element. So I'm going to use this our container text here to explain our box model. So let me come over to our CSS file. Where is that, our container? Yep. So let me remove the width, or let me just make it 100%. Yep, exactly. So this now, I gave this thing a background color so that we understand how the box model works. So this is our box. this outer line here, the outer line here is what we call our border, but it will not be visible now unless we actually style the border. So let me now style the border using border and give it the values of border is the size of the border, how thick you want the border to be. So I'm going to put 2 pixels. Then the color, the style of the border you want. So I want to make it solid. Then the color you want the border to be. So I'm going to make this black. So we are going to see the effect of this now. So as you can see, this you can now see our border around this. So now, as we saw in that box model, we do have padding before our border. So the space in between our border and our inner element is what we call the padding. So I'm just going to add our padding here so that we can see what's happening. So to add a padding, we can do padding top. This is padding top, padding bottom, padding left, and padding right. So it almost seems like we have padding here and here. So I'm just going to put padding left and right so that I can see it in action. So I'm going to say padding left, and I'm going to do 20 pixels. And as you can see, it has created a space here. Then after our border, the next thing we now have is margin. So we have margin outside our borders. So we can now add, let me now add the same way we style our padding, top, left, bottom, right. We can also style our margin the same way. So I'm going to add a margin top and give it 20 pixels. So as you can see, it has shifted. So this is our margin space. This is our border. This is our padding, and this is our content. So this is what we call CSS CSS box model. So I hope we understood that. If it's confusing in any way, I can re-explain, or I can explain again. Did we all understand that? Hello, please, somebody should answer me. Let me know that I'm not talking to myself. Because hello,
we understand. Can you hear me?
Yeah. All right, now, thank you very much.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
You know, CSS uses frameworks, right?
Yes.
Okay, I want to know if all the basic features, like all the features that you have in the basic CSS, can they all be found in the frameworks too? Like, can you still use the frameworks and get the same results with all the features that CSS comes with?
Yes. You know, when somebody is bringing out a framework, they actually make sure that they cover up every scenario that using that language itself does. So yeah, CSS frameworks, actually the concept is just to make writing all of your CSS easier. So instead of you to be writing all your CSS over, they've already written everything for you, and your own is just to be making use of their classes and all. So I think that will be clearer when we enter frameworks. But yes, frameworks basically cover everything in CSS. The only thing is, if you want to now customize or add more customization to the frameworks or to the things the frameworks provide, then you will now have to use your own CSS. But most of the time you can build a website with pure CSS framework or library without even having to write your own single CSS line of code. So it's very possible. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, boss. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this class, we're going to be talking about flexbox and grid. So these two concepts are just what is left for you to become, understand how CSS works fully. So if we understand how flexbox and grid works, then we are ready to go. So I'm going to try and explain this as much as I can, but I also feel that I don't think I'll be able to do enough justice to it. So I also advise that we can take it, like note it down and go back and learn more about CSS grid and CSS flexbox. But we are still going to do that today. Unfortunately, I'm unable to record this class. I don't know why the app is just acting up, so my apologies to people that are not here today, but we move. So anyways, I'm going to talk about flexbox first. So both flexbox and CSS, both flexbox and grid are layout styles. So it's just how we lay out elements or components in our HTML page. You get, so if you come to a site, you would see the nav on top, or navigation on top. Sometimes you see navigation by the left, or you see header, then you see section, then you see what do they call it, another section by the right, and all of those things. So the layout, or what is used to build this layout, or these basic layouts, are usually flexbox or grid. So they are basically they do the same thing, but they use different approaches, or this different approach, plus the way both of them work, they have their differences. So without much further ado, I'm just going to go into our first one, which is flexbox. So I don't clean up all of this, I'm just going to create a whole new file here and name it flex.html. So I'm going to create my basic HTML file templates, then we move. So for things to be laid out, or for things to work with flex or flexbox, they have to be inside a container. So any of the styling you are doing to them will work with respect to the container they are inside. So I'm just going to create a div here and give it a class of flex. So let me link our CSS file here. So I'm just going to copy our linking here and paste it here. So now our CSS file is linked. So I'm just going to create a basic structure so that we understand how this thing works. So inside flex, I'm now going to create more containers. Div so let me just name it item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. So let me just put something inside. 1, 2, 3, 4. So refreshing the page, let me see, sorry, is our flex page. Okay, so presently we've not added the flexbox styling to this page, so that is why it just looks plain like this. So once we start adding our flexbox styling to it, then we'll see how this page or layout works. So first of all, I'm going to style our items elements, so they will look better to us. So what I'm going to do is select their classes. So I use full stop item 1. So you can also select multiple classes and give them the same styling, and to do that you just have to make use of comma. So I can now use item 2, comma, item 3, sorry, full stop here, comma, then full stop item 4, then bracket. So anything I write in between these curly braces will affect the 4 items here. So what I'm going to do now, what I want to do now is give them background color so that they can all be visible. So I'm going to give them background color of green. Let me refresh the page. Yep, so they all have background color of green, but I want to make them look finer. So now we'll see as all of these things I've spoke about, come into play. So next I want to give them all width of 50 pixels. So let's see how that will look. All of them now has a width of 50 pixels, but they look as if they are on the same line. So I also want to give them height of 50 pixels. So all of them now have height of 50 pixels. The next thing I want to do is I want to align the text align center here, so that all the text, or all the text here will be in the center. So now the next thing I now want to demonstrate here is padding and margin. So if you notice, they're almost the same thing, so I just want to use padding now and separate them. So what I'm going to do, margin is outer space, so I'm just going to give margin bottom here. So I'm going to give all of them a margin bottom of 5 pixels. So as you can see, they are now the spaces has now shown up. So to now make this thing show in flex layout, all you have to do is now style the parent container flex and use the display property and give it value of flex, making it display flex. So as you can see, it has stayed, it has aligned because of this flex property. But if I comment this out now and refresh the page, it's going to go back. So let me just leave it as it is. Come here, they are aligned. So instead of margin bottom now, let me just give it margin right, because they are now on the same line. So margin right will add margins to the right of all of these elements. So yeah, all of them are now showing on the same line. So aside, by default flex shows in a row format, but you can also change the format that it shows using the properties called flex direction. So let's say flex direction, you can see column, which sorry, this is on the wrong, supposed to be here. Flex direction column makes it makes it show up as a column. Flex direction row makes it show up as a row. Then we also have other properties like inverse, so we can inverse the row using row reverse, and as you can see, it now starts from this other end, but from 4 to 1 instead of 1 to 4. So I'm just going to change it back to row and leave it here, so that would go on. So aside flex direction, we also have flex wrap. So what flex wrap is meant for is to, in case it reaches the end of the container, it should start from the next line. You get? So let me come here and give this a, sorry, let me put this inside of a container so that I can demonstrate flex wrap. So I can demonstrate flex wrap let me give the container a different width. Let me give it a width of 50%. So let me remove every other thing here. And leave it as just the width. Maybe I'll leave the background color so that we can see the space is taken. So I'm going to add more components here using the wrap, and we'll see that it should go down to the next line with the flex wrap. So I'm going to make use of wrap here. Then let me now add multiple lines also and see if it's going to go on to the next line. So as you can see, as it got here, it now continued on the next line. So to make this thing look better, let's just add a margin bottom. Um, 5 pixels. Okay, so now we have because of the wrap, it continued on the next line, but let's make it no wrap and see what happens. Or let's just comment this up first. So as you can see, it tries to shrink. So the more we add, the more it continues to shrink itself to fit into this small box. But once if we now use the wrap, it maintains its width of 50%, but once it gets to the end, it just continues on the next. Sorry, it's supposed to be wrap. It just continues on the next line. Please, what's it? Oh, it's 902. So yeah, that is it for flex wrap. I'm just going to push the remaining part, because I don't want to take so much time. So I'm just going to ask us to go and look into grid. Let us look into grid by ourselves, and maybe by our next class or meeting. It might not have to be a class, because we are looking to hold sort of like a HTML CSS practice on either Saturday or Sunday, but Saturday is tomorrow, so it will not make sense. So we'll say maybe sometime on Sunday. It's not a class specifically, but kind of like a practice. Would actually do something with HTML and CSS and show it live here. But if you're interested, you can come up, look at how things are going or how things are working, ask your questions, and learn. So